All right. Good afternoon. Glenn Stein, Realty Executives here. We are going to talk about the North versus the South. We're going to be talking about the differences in pricing. I've had a couple of comments recently about, what's the price difference? Like, I think it's well known that, pricing above 466, the older the home, normally it's going to be priced a little bit less, right? Like that's an obvious thing. Like if you take apples to apples, comparable home versus comparable home, take a model home, maybe it's a bougainvillea, gardenia, iris, courtyard villa, patio villa, whatever it is. If you just say they're relatively the same, if you were to put them side by side, except age is a factor, one is 10 years newer, then you would expect the one that's 10 years older to be less money or less value, right? Like that's a given. That's not the question. The question is, what is the price difference when we're comparing, north versus south? The more time we've been here, by the way, we actually, the building I'm in right now, we're in the Realty Executives office on 66, just across from Laurel Manor, and I'm doing this live, um, whatever date it is, April 14th on a Friday. What we have noticed is the more time that passes, where we're looking at areas south of 44 and even, kind of south and even, obviously east as the villages flows east on the turnpike, we're noticing that that's a completely different city. Like that's a whole different area. Had a meeting with one of my great agents at Realty Executives here, and she lives just north of the turnpike, but south of 44. And it takes her 45 minutes to go from, north all the way south to north. Like that's, if the traffic doesn't flow right, like we're in a city now, like in the villages. Some people think it's too busy, but the lifestyle has been pretty consistent. And I don't know that there's a better area. I hear people that live north and like they love it north, would never move south, and vice versa. People like, they say, well, it's older up north and older people up north and younger people down south. Maybe. I think there's a certain maybe there's a certain argument behind that for sure. But one thing I know is that there is a difference, and I want to share with you. I want to share with you exactly, what we're seeing in the various markets. Right, we're going to take a look at that today. So, for instance, what I want to talk to you about, let's look at, when we're looking at let's take the northern section first. And the way we look at this is not just geographic area. I look at year built because the village is mostly was built, north to south. Uh, and, as it got older, then the further you go, the newer the homes are. So if you look at north of 466, let's take that segment. And pretty much what you're looking at is, you're looking at the areas like east of 441, then over to Spanish Springs, then down El Camino, around the Savannah Center. Then you're talking about places like El Santiago. Then you're talking about places like Harmswood that have larger homes that are typically over $1 million. And you're talking about, various types of homes, whether it's Calumet and then Chatham and areas like that. And then all the way down to like the polo fields, like up to 466. And if you look at this, I'm looking at the last 6 months sold. There were 296 homes that sold in this northern section on MLS. Okay. And what we're looking at is out of this 296, the price ranges run anywhere between 77,000. There was a mobile home on the Orange Blossom side that sold for 77,000, a 1.5. And a couple, probably looking at about 20 homes that sold under 200,000 in the last 6 months, to all the way to 1.1 million. And that was actually a home that was a St. Simon. Looks like it's let's see, where was that? Was in Abelos. Okay, that's in Harmswood. So that sold for 1.1. That gives you an idea of the different price ranges. Most of the homes sold in that, probably $400,000 to $500,000 range. And when I'm looking at a chart here, and by the way, for the folks that are, while I'm pulling this up, something to really think about if you are interested, first quarter report that we always send out, or that we have hard copies of at our open houses and here at the office on 466. If that's something you want, please text me your email address and I can email it to you digitally. 352-572-3796, 352-572-3796. So we're going to look at price per square foot. Let's look at the price per square foot, and we're going to look at the comparison here. And one thing we've seen when we're looking at price per square foot, the list price square footage ratio, which essentially gives us an idea that, from in 2018, $112 to $105 a foot was basically what the prices went for. And then you're looking at all the way up to now, current times, roughly 175 to 200 is basically what we're seeing in that ballpark, depending on what month. So I would say 175, 180 on the list price per square foot. If we start looking at, let's look at sold price. So I'll give you an idea of what things are selling for, not just list, because I think there is a real difference in that, and I think one thing that I want to tell you about is that when we're looking at our biggest challenge right now is the tug of war between buyers and sellers. So I kind of want to say something that might be a little bit controversial, but I do want to say that the problem we're having with sellers at this point is that the sellers are wanting more than what the property is worth, which is no big surprise, right? Like, no duh, that's going to happen. But we're having a challenge in getting people to be realistic in their pricing, and hence the prices or the homes are staying on the market longer, and also we're seeing longer days on market. Okay, so that's a real thing. Like, we're seeing a real problem with sellers wanting more than what it's worth. It stays on the market. They're leaving room for negotiation. But what's happening is there is no negotiation because your buyers are not going for it, and it's not the agent's fault. It's just, I think it's misinformation. It's not understanding how homes get sold in a challenging market, right? Like in a plateauing or slightly declining marketplace. And what we're seeing price wise, it's still plateauing, but we've seen a lot of price decreases because sellers are pricing up here. That's a big problem. Now, on the buyer side, the issue we're having with buyers right now is buyers are having the issue of, oh, the market's going to collapse, so we're going to wait. The reality is we're not seeing indications that the market is collapsing. The market is returning to normal, where we're starting to approach almost 400 homes on the market in MLS. We're seeing more inventory and we're seeing price reductions, but it's not a collapse in the marketplace, because there is still enough demand. So it is a challenge both ways, where people think that, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. So, the market's going to collapse and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of negativity in the system. But, the reality is we're seeing more of a balanced marketplace. So it's really getting the buyers and sellers to be more realistic about what's really, really happening. As far as, let's look at average sales price, as I promised, for the North. We're looking at it right around $348,000 has been the average. $374 in January, $334 in February, $348 in March. Averages can be a little bit unusual, but for the most part, I would say there has been, if you look at the year of 2022, you can, depending on what month. In fact, let me go to year. No, that's probably what I want to use. You're really looking at 374. If you take an average, if you take an average of 2022, the northern section, north of 466, 357,000 was the average of all the months together. Average sales price. Now we're at 351. 2021 it was 280. 2020 it was 254. So you're looking at a slight decrease in average sales price in the North. Okay, so that's a thing. Keep that in mind. So 351. I'm doing this, real time. I'm not just telling you this. I'm actually doing this real time on MLS. So 351 for 2023, price drop of 6,000 on the average for uh, for the northern sections of the villages. Okay, and obviously the north has some advantages, more mature landscaping. People feel like it's maybe too far away from Sumter Landing. That might be a negative. Closer to Spanish Springs in certain areas. But you do have the advantage of being closer to the Savannah Center, the polo fields. It's a different feel all the way around. Okay, so I think that's something to really consider. So if we're looking at the South, and the South, depends on what you consider the South. Some people think it's south of 466. Some people think it's south of 466A, or even we're getting to the point where it's south of 44. So if we were to take a year built, so I'm going to do like 2004. Let's go to like 2012. Let's take a look at that. Let's see what the price per square foot is there. From 2004 to 2012 year built, we had 209 properties close in the last 6 months in the villages. And, if we start looking at the results, let's see, I'm going to pull up the average. Let's just go straight into average sales price on this one, because I think that is probably the most interesting for most people. Average sales price, we're going to group it by primary year, just like what we did for, let's do the last 5 years, right? So average sales price, let's see, the data says 454. So obviously, right, like that's a significant increase. Obviously, some larger homes. Also, this is a sweet spot of the villages still, I think, because people still prefer, for the most part, Sumter Landing. Some people would say Brownwood, some people Spanish Springs. Leave it in the comments. I'm interested. What's your favorite square? Most people think Sumter Landing, but if you think differently, put it in the chat. I'd be interested to see that as an informal poll. 2018, 326, 2019, 334, 2020, 339, 370, 465 last year, 454 this year. It's primarily between 466 and 466A. That's kind of the area that we pulled up here roughly. So you're seeing at least $100,000 play on average sales price, moving from north of 466 to between the sixes. That gives you an idea right there. And we're also seeing a little bit of a decrease, $9,000 average sales price decrease in that particular area. Okay, so now let's take 2013. So now let's start looking at a little bit further south, closer to 466A, and we're going to look at, let's see, Fenny was built in like 2017. We're going to go to like 2016. Okay, let's look at this, 2016, 2013 through 2016, which is going to be mostly that, between 466A and 44. Let's look at what that does. And that's going to give us an additional idea. Differences in pricing, average sales price, right? That's what this is going to tell us. And, we're looking at starting, lowest price was 280 in this area. Let's see, we're going to customize last 5 years. Sorry, I'm not able to share at the moment. My share button's not exactly working, but anybody that's interested, I can give you, I can send this to you if you're really interested in this. Average sales price, primary year. So when we're looking at the data now, significantly higher. This is very interesting. And this is where because numbers can lie a little bit. So 2018, 342, 2019, 409, 423, 452, 495 in 2022, 604 in 2023. Right? So 604 in 2023. That's we're actually have gone up in 2022 versus 2023. Now that could be a little bit deceiving. And if you look at it, we can take a look at how many actually have sold. Let's look at the numbers. So 46 properties have closed in the last 6 months. If you look at a period of, let's take a period of like maybe the 6 months prior to that. So 46 is our number. This is south of 466A mostly. Okay. Let's look at, we're going to look at a close date. We're going to say from January. We're going to go from January 2022. And we're going to go, let's say to like June, right? And this is going to give you an example of the difference in the marketplace, 78. Like there's a difference there. Like you're seeing more homes that sold in 2022 in the first 6 months of 2022 versus the last 6 months, starting with the end of last year into this year, which includes season as well. So tells you like we're down as far as number of sales, but the average sales prices are holding steady, and in this particular case actually went up. So that's super interesting. That's something to watch out for. So now, all right, now let's look at 2016, actually 2017, mostly south of 44 here, to 2023. Okay, and now keep in mind, we don't handle new construction, right? There's a difference between a village agent licensed by the state of Florida versus an MLS realtor that we basically have to abide by NAR and FAR code of ethics. So we don't deal with new construction, but we're working with, if you look at 2017 and 2023, which is, partially going to be between 466A and 44, but mostly south of 44, literally over the last 6 months, we've seen, let's see, let me make sure that this is correct before I give out misinformation. Don't want to do that. Let's see, let's go from, what would that be, November, actually October 2022 to where we are right now, April 14th, and looking at only 29 properties sold. Not surprising, since many people that are buying, they're buying new construction, or this happens a lot. That tends to happen where people, not going to judge it, they list with their village's agent and don't have the same exposure as what we can have and what we can deliver. That's another story. Be happy to talk about that one day if somebody wants to know more about that, about the differences. But 29 properties sold over the last 6 months. And let's look at the average sales prices. Like you're getting a real idea, like the differences. I said north versus south, but the reality is we're looking at 4 different sections here, north of 466, in between the sixes, and then, 3 major areas. And then between the sixes, 466A to 44, and then obviously south of 44, 4 different areas. Let's take a look. So I'm going to do the same thing I did for, I'm going to look at the last 5 years, looking at average sales price and primary year. And the numbers say, okay, so this is interesting. So 2018, 332,000, 404, 382 in 2020, 459 in 2021, 446. So went down from 2021 to 2022. Prices went down, and then they jumped up 479.5. These are average sales prices south of 44, right? So that's essentially what we're looking at. If you have questions about any of this, it's like this gives you an idea of what we're looking at. There's a big difference north of 466. Like prices are less, no big surprise. Older homes, we're seeing a lot of remodeling in these areas. The prices tend to be a little bit more plateaued and a little bit very similar between the sixes because it's close to Sumter Landing, right, William? Right, in between, the sixes, Sumter Landing, and 466A to 44, similarities there. And we tend to do well in all of these areas on the MLS side. And then south of 44, we don't do as well, but we're gaining traction. And this has been the history in the villages that, where new construction is, we start to gain traction after like 3 to 4 years. Fenny has been around, the Fenny Grill, I think it's been 5 years now, almost 6. I think we're coming close to 6 years. We're gaining traction, and every caravan that we do, and this is one of the reasons I think you should list with Realty Executives. I'm biased here in this case, try to give you unbiased information. The one thing that we do is caravan, like a physical caravan, where we're literally bringing our realtors in our bus and looking at homes every single Wednesday morning. Like that's a thing that we do every single week, almost without fail, other than like Christmas, holidays, and that type of thing. But what we have found is every caravan we're going on right now includes a property south of 44, right? In those areas along the turnpike. We're going there every week, which didn't happen. I'd say probably a year ago, we were going like maybe once or twice a month. Now it's every week we have a listing down there. So we're gaining traction. It's very typical, right? And I think the other thing we need to look at is there's now a difference. It's no longer north and south. It's becoming east and west, because the eastern part of that southern area right around Finney is vastly different than the new construction areas along the turnpike, right? Like Okahumpka, and we're also seeing more land was bought by the villages along, around Mascot area, which is literally like 5 steps away from Claremont and 5 steps away from Orlando. So as you can tell, as you drive along the turnpike, there's growth on both sides. So be happy to answer any questions. If you ever need anything, you can connect with me for anything. 352-572-3796. You can text me as well. And please subscribe to our channel. That would be fabulous. If you like the video, thumbs up. If you don't like the video, don't do anything. So happy Friday. Hope everybody had a great Easter this past weekend and Passover, and hope to connect soon. Take care.